when you started, I read over Shabbos. Like, what was your idea, and what was the goal?
The goal for me was to encourage using Shabbos, not to just unplug. Everybody's like, Shabbos, unplug, get off technology, get off your phone. Get into something on Shabbos. And I realized every Shabbos I look forward that I could start a new book. I could read something new, an article, a book or something. And what I started to do is I started to post on social media. I said, I read this over Shabbos. And I would just put a picture of the book that I read and then some snippets, and I put it on social media.
Everyone watching this knows what social media is, right?
I hope so. I don't know that for sure. I think people know what social media is. But I would post every single Shabbos, this is the book that I read, this is the article that I read. Sometimes I do finish it over Shabbos, sometimes I don't finish it over Shabbos. But to realize that Shabbos is a time, I want to get away from unplugging on Shabbos, and Shabbos is you're plugging into Torah learning, ideas, and it's for everybody. It's a doorway, no matter what your background is in learning, no matter what your Jewish education has been. Everybody on Shabbos can find a book, an article, an idea that they can plug in.
So you're not just zoning out. I know you're a big Machshava Jew, right? You're not in a situation of header with an ayin, right? You're just like
removing something. And like, okay, I'm not on my phone on Shabbos. That's why it's special.
No, you're positively plugging in, engaging.
And what's beautiful is that you could measure, at the end, where towards the end of the secular year 2023, I could go back and I could almost look at my entire year based on what book I read each Shabbos.
Wow.
So I go through and I've read, about 52 books over the course. Maybe I missed a week or two over here or over there. And you see wow, every year you could measure your growth on what ideas, what authors, what books have I been plugging into.
So using that concept, wouldn't it be so cool if you're able to get people to look back over their Jewish year and say, what I do Parshas Bereshis? What I do Parshas Noach? Parshas Lech Lecha? We're almost finishing Sefer Bereshis now. What did I learn new in Parshas Vayetze?
This is the idea, and we've been saying this forever. The original, I read this over Shabbos, the original book that we plug into each Shabbos isn't a Jewish history book. It's not an academic book. It is the weekly Parsha. It is Shnayim Mikra ve'Echad Targum. It is connecting to the ideas in each Parsha with translation, whatever you find comfortable with. There's so many different ways to find a good translation, and living with the Parsha each and every week.
I think there's different ways to do that. Some people need some assistance. They need things to read and think about. But what I find, and to do this, I don't think you have to be a tremendous Talmud Chacham in any way, shape, sense, or form. If you read a few Rashis, the Parshas that we're going through now, so what comes to mind now, whereas this week is Parshas Vayigash, last week we read Parshas Miketz. Do you know that Rashi has a conversation between Yosef and the Shvatim, quoting a medrash about hostage negotiation?
The most exciting thing for me is this partnership that we did, which is I read this over Shabbos, and I read all these books about Jewish history, and I realized that the things that are discussed in each Parsha, these were started debate and ideas that we're still living through in our days. So I realized we have such an incredible opportunity. Let's take the ultimate, I read this over Shabbos, the weekly Parsha, and let's plug it in to a different idea, an incident, personalities from Jewish history each and every week. So you're learning an idea in the Parsha through the lens of Jewish history, but not just an idea. We give you all the books, all the articles, and that's why this partnership is so exciting for me. That exactly what you said. Rashi's talking about hostage negotiation in the Parsha. This is playing out in our times. Every week we upload what we started to call reading Jewish history in the Parsha, where I take the books, the articles, all the stuff that you see around here that I've been reading, and we plug it into these Parsha ideas, and we give you all the links that we do on email, but the audio we upload to All Parsha, and it's a way to connect to the Parsha through the lens of Jewish history, the unfolding story of the Jewish people.
To be very open and honest, even though
I love your openness and honesty.
Okay, good, thank you. Even though I direct the platforms, I don't have time to listen to every person's share every single day and every single week. I try to sample and
let me down slowly. I like this introduction.
Exactly. So there is one specific episode I remember listening that you recorded, and the way the mind works is that if you see something about that at a later date, it brings you back to the first time. Exactly. So you recently sent out an email about this anti-Zionist. That was like the subject of the email, an anti-Zionist rabbi. So someone like me, my mind would naturally flow towards Satmar, toward Karta, anti-Zionist.
No, that's not what it was about.
Right. So what was it about? A Reform rabbi. Tell us about that episode.
The first American anti-Zionist movement was anchored in this rabbi named Rabbi Elmer Berger. I think it's one of the most fascinating stories in Jewish history, who really tried to uproot the concept of the Jewish people. It's a dangerous story, but he became what's known as the PLO's rabbi. He became the rabbi for the Palestinian liberation. But it's a fascinating story of where the Palestinian movement got their ideas about, that you're always talking about the Jewish people aren't real. Where'd they get these ideas from? So they got it from a real rabbi, and we tell that story. I think we did that Parshas Lech Lecha. We've told stories about disagreements and early stories of religious Zionism. We've come back to a lot of Eretz Yisrael stuff, and we spoke about Rabbi Soloveitchik, we've spoken about Rav Kook, we spoke about the Hebron massacre for Parshas Chayei Sarah. But every week we find something, we say, this is still playing out in our times. This story is still relevant in this very, very moment. And we see through the lens of Jewish history as a new way to reconnect to the Parsha.
So this is a question for Rabbi David Bashevkin. You really...
David or Dovid?
I don't know, up to you. And Tinek, you David or David?
I'm Dovid to anybody
You're David
who can
to anybody.
pronounce Dovid.
Okay, fine. As long as they don't say David, right?
David. Anything but David. You call me Dovid, you call me David, you can call me Dibash. You cannot call me David.
Okay.
Or David.
How do you think of yourself in so many different areas? You're multi-talented, you're multitasking. So this is something that you did, saying a shir in a shul, right?
The way this got started is because I love reading. That's from my parents. I love reading. And every Shabbos I was reading these books. And when I moved into this part of Teaneck, the person who used to live next door to me used to give a shir before the 9 o'clock minyan. And he ended up moving out. He was a close friend, George Silfen. And I started taking over. But I wanted it to be a different type of Parsha shir. I didn't want it to be just to say over Vartlach. I didn't want to do... He was doing like Lumdus in the Parsha. So you take a Rashi and then you could unpack it with these wonderful works from the Minchas Asher, from the Chavetz Sharon. I wanted to do something different. I said, I'm not going to do Lumdus off the Parsha. I'm going to do Jewish history off the Parsha. So I start each year. I've been giving this for many years. I start each year with a question on the Parsha. And then in the middle, we unpack something from Jewish history. And then we close it based on that story. We return back to our original question. And I realized it got very popular. People really start to enjoy this. You're learning about Jewish history. You're learning about the Parsha. You're learning about the Jewish people. You're learning about machshava and ideas. I want to bring this to a wider audience. It's not recorded on Shabbos. So that's where this partnership really began. Let's bring this to a much wider audience. And I'm so grateful to the sponsors who really made this happen. Jana and Lior Hode and family. They're the heart of the people.
What I've been learning through my journey in All Daf, All Parsha, and All Mishnah, and just being involved, have the merit of being involved, the schus to be involved in this type of work, is that there's real Torah learning, which means opening up a book, reading a pasuk, reading the Rashi, whether you do it with the art scroll, without the art scroll, any other translation. Gemara, the same thing, listening to a shir and all that. But there is so much more, especially in today's world, that there is so much being thrown at you, coming from all directions, to be able to even have your enjoyment, your non-kviyus itim, right? Your non-learning, to also be connected to learning, right? It's amazing and so important today.
There's something called consilience. It's this idea that I heard from one of my teachers, Rabbi Bergman, where you see all of the questions, all the ideas in the world ultimately connect to one central point of unity. It's the idea that really animates the entire Torah. And you realize, you read a book on modern Jewish history, you read a book on some phenomenon and how they make paper, on rare books. Everything has an entry point and is a doorway to further advance and deepen your knowledge of Torah, of Amcha Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what we do each week. That's what we try to do in the Shir. That's what we try to do in reading Jewish history in the Parsha. And that's what the All Parsha app is all about.
Download the All Parsha app, available in the App Store or the Google Store.
App. I've got the app.
Even David Bashevkin has the app.
Even I have the app.
Even he has the app.